Check, check, check. Welcome to the Stadium Pulse, a college football show where we will be only talking about college football. If you are tuning in anywhere across the world, leave a comment, leave a like. I'm already asking for your interaction, but I promise you there is going to be something that I'm going to be talking about today that will pique your interest. We will only talk about college football around here. I promise you that. If you have clicked on this link, if you've seen one of the videos, if you have interacted with this channel at all, more times than not, you are a fan of college football. And even if you're not, and you're wanting to learn about the sport, you've come to the right place. I feel like with this sport, you need to be able to talk about it with a level of passion, and you need some investment into the sport. In my entire life, I have been a college football fan my entire life, and I think it is the best sport in the world. And I cannot wait because we are about, what is it, 10 days? We may be at single digits at this point, and I believe we are because the first game will be this Friday, next Friday, pardon me, Georgia Tech, Iowa State. We have already previewed that game. If you want to go see that, that is on this channel. We have gotten some real momentum with this channel, and I want to say thank you to anybody who is tuning in or is going to watch these podcasts back. It means the world to me. We have a loaded show for you today. We have three main topics. I'm going to tell you the menu right now. We're going to give some updates to the quarterback battles because originally we were going to be talking about Georgia and what their season is supposed to be, as it's a very unique season for the Bulldogs. But we have way too much news in terms of the quarterback battles to not talk about them. We'll also talk about four of the biggest surprises per each college football Power Four conference. I have picked four teams that I think are going to surprise the general college football public. And the last one, we're going to talk about the state of Texas, my home state, loaded with college football teams. It just means more in the state of Texas. People say in the SEC, it just means more. I promise you, football is truly a religion in the state of Texas. And so I'm going to rank the top 5 college football programs. We have a loaded show, like I said. Let's talk about quarterbacks, the premier position in all of football. College, NFL, high school, everyone wants to talk about quarterbacks. So let's talk about Ohio State. Ohio State is in a very interesting position in terms of quarterbacks. Everyone assumes it's going to be Julian Sayin, former 5-star transfer from Alabama. He was the one that was waiting while Will Howard was off winning a national championship, that it was going to be Julian Sayin next up. Well, hold on a moment. You got a man named Keenholz, last name Keenholz, who has taken a real big chunk into this job. Now, am I predicting here that Ohio State is going to have a quarterback controversy? No, I think Julian Sayin is ending up being the starting quarterback against Texas. I think that's just what's going to happen. But it is interesting to note, and it's something to keep a little bit of track, a little bit of keep your notes open about it, because Sayin is a quarterback that I think is super talented. Everyone wants to talk about his uber quick release. If you watch any practice clip with Julian Sayin, he can get the ball out at a lightning quick pace with a very good arm. But you have to take the job at some point. That's just what you have to do when you are in a quarterback battle, especially at the collegiate level. You have to take the job. And that's what concerns me the most about Ohio State as we go into this season, is the fact that Julian Sayin has not taken this job. He's let the door open for Keenholz, a more athletic quarterback, as they are going through a transition at the offensive coordinator position. And that leads me to my next point that I think is going to be something that people haven't talked about. People will look at Jeremiah Smith. They'll look at the transfer tight end that they got, Max Clare, who I think is super dynamic. And people want to talk about the quarterback position. What I'm curious about is Brian Hartline in the offensive coordinator position. He was the wide receivers coach. Everyone talks about the pipeline that is wide receivers at Ohio State. And Brian Hartline is a huge reason why they have the reputation that they do. What I'm curious about is almost a situation where you're letting your kid drive a car for the first time. And if you are one who has experienced this, where you were the one driving, or you're a parent who has helped their kid drive, how much are you letting them make a potential mistake without grabbing the wheel? I think of that with Jimbo Fisher when he brought in Bobby Petrino at the offensive coordinator position. I think Josh Pate made this reference where Jimbo Fisher was finally relinquishing the play calling duties and gave it to Bobby Petrino, but it never really felt like a Bobby Petrino offense. It felt like that for the first couple games in the non-conference, and as soon as they played Miami, it went right back to Jimbo's offense. Now, Ryan Day really did leave, Chip Kelly the freedom to basically call what he wanted. Ohio State looked like a different offense, not the air raids that we're used to with like Justin Fields. It felt like an Ohio State different type of offense. But now you have an in-house hire with a guy that is familiar with Ryan Day for a very long time. I begin to wonder, at what point is Ryan Day most likely going to grab the wheel, and then we're back into a traditional Ohio State air raid offense with all the wide receiver talent? Or are they going to see what they saw was successful, which was a balanced attack going into the season? I know we strayed away from the quarterback battle a little bit, but that's something that we haven't talked about yet, and it's a point of concern that hasn't been really talked about too much. Notre Dame. What do you know about Notre Dame's quarterback battle? Or what did you think you know? As Steve Angeli, the former backup who played a little bit in the college football playoff, it was going to be Steve Angeli versus CJ Carr going into the spring. That was the expectation. Steve Angeli goes into the portal, and now it is seen that CJ Carr is going to be the definitive starting quarterback for Notre Dame. And it's seen as they're going to have a quarterback that, in terms of arm talent and potential, easily lifts up the ceiling of what this offense can be with Jaden Greathouse and Jeremiah Love and the running backs and Price, and the offensive line always seems to be good. That Notre Dame is now going to have another gear that I myself have also said is what has limited them from potentially winning a national championship. They've gotten to a national championship as of last season, but we all knew that their offense was going to be extremely limited with a guy like Riley Leonard. And we saw that play out in the playoff, that you can win with him, but not because of him. CJ Carr being a quarterback that we thought had a ceiling that could be the playmaker that could elevate the offense. But things have changed, folks. Things have changed. Kenny Minchey reports coming out of Notre Dame's fall camp, and this is why I love college football. Kenny Minchey is seen as the favorite to potentially win the starting quarterback job for Notre Dame. I am shocked. This is probably the biggest shock in terms of quarterback battle news, just because of the timelines. It was seen as Carr's job, but like I said, with a guy like Julian Sayin, you have to take the job. The job's not going to be handed to you. You more than likely are going to be the favorite. And if the game was played tomorrow, sure, you probably are the guy. But to definitively take the job is a completely different thing. And there's a lot of thought to this. Is it a red flag for Notre Dame? A little bit. Minchie is not the type of passer or projected the type of passer as a CJ Carr. Minchie is a little bit more mobile, more towards the Riley Leonard path. I'm not saying they're one-for-one comparisons, but you are definitely going to potentially be more limited. Now, Minchie could go out there and be an incredible playmaker and take Notre Dame all the way to a national championship. That could happen. I could be completely wrong. But from what is projected, it sounds like Minchie is more on the side of a mobile quarterback, a little bit more limited of an offense, but seems to be running it at a higher level. While CJ Carr does have that ceiling in terms of a passer, but there's a couple of weaknesses that Notre Dame has not expected to happen, but has come to fruition during fall camp. And it sounds like it's a lot closer than what we originally anticipated going into the summer. I love college football. I love how quickly things can change. And the last one isn't as much of news, but more circling. I've said many times, if you follow my TikTok, you see the @ down below. I'm a little bit lower, like many others, on Tennessee. And this comes for a couple of reasons. I've studied the veer and shoot offense, what Josh Heupel likes to run, what he asks out of his quarterbacks, the demand that they are to be expected to throw the ball downfield and have a little bit of a gunslinger mentality. Nico Imalava could not do that at a high level at an accurate rate. He could throw the ball down the field basically anywhere he wanted, but he was not going to be able to put it on the money where a wide receiver can make a play. You bring in Joey Aguilar, basically making the trade with UCLA, which was funny in of itself. But Joey Aguilar, it's a mixed bag. People point to the interceptions. There's a lot of context. App State basically said, we need Joey to be a guy that can get up 40 points because our defense is not going to be able to, have any kind of pushback. Joey, I need you to go get 40 or we are losing this football game. And what that brings is a gunslinger mentality, for better and for worse. For better in the sense that I think Josh Heupel has a guy that's going to rip it. He is going to push the ball downfield. But he's also going to have a guy that is coming in with some tendencies of not playing through the confines of an offense, potentially forcing a ball into some really tough spots. And we've seen that challenge come to fruition during fall camp. But the problem that Josh Heupel is going to run into, and I think why I'm a little bit lower in the vacuum of what Tennessee is this season, I think long-term as a program, I'm buying into Tennessee. I like what they're doing outside of the fact that they're going to Adidas. That's another story for another day. But they have to potentially go to Merklinger, who I'm not that high on, to be honest, and just the confines of what this offense usually asks for in an archetype of quarterbacks. He doesn't really have that right now. He doesn't have these larger sized quarterbacks with massive arms. Their depth chart does not represent that, which brings some interesting questions. And it sounds like they're going to slightly lean Aguilar, which doesn't surprise me because a lot of people will just assume, oh, he's throwing, terrible passes. He's not someone people want to buy into. You got to realize he was at one program after transferring to App State. He was already in the building for UCLA and he made another move. That's difficult for any quarterback. It would be shocking if he had just stepped into Knoxville and took the job immediately, especially knowing what this offense is going to be. But that is everything in terms of quarterbacks and a lot of the news that is coming out. I mean, we are so close. We're at the last week of fall camp. I'm starting to see TikTok dances of, players finally getting back to fall camp. If you're a player watching, congratulations. Fall camp is brutal. And it is an accomplishment in of itself to get to the other side of it. But like I said, we are going to talk about 4 teams from each conference that I think is going to be the biggest surprise for the upcoming college football season. For the SEC, because we always have to start with the SEC, the Texas A&M Aggies, I think, are going to be a huge surprise to the rest of the conference. And the reason why I'm so confident that Texas A&M is going to be the ones to rise above potentially that tier 2, because honestly, there's so many teams that we could talk about: South Carolina, Florida, Oklahoma, plenty of others who have really, really dynamic quarterbacks. Some questions about the coaching staff, some questions about their surrounding systems. I don't have that as much with Texas A&M. I also get the dynamic quarterback. I also get a schedule that is favorable in terms of the SEC. It's not perfect. There is some road challenges, but it's more manageable than an Oklahoma and a Florida. And I really believe in the floor being high enough to where if they just at bare minimum get to 7 games based on who they have to play, they just have to upset a couple teams, and we're right there at 9-10 win territory, which 9 wins for Florida is definitely not the same as 9 wins for Texas A&M. But I really do think that they are quietly building something that the general college football public is not realizing isn't a Jimbo Fisher team. The problem with Jimbo Fisher teams, especially with 2022, and the reason why they went 5-7 was they played so many true freshmen. And then we find out a couple of years after the fact that the true freshmen that were brought in with that number 1 overall recruiting class that got a ton of, national coverage, that class was actually not as good as we initially thought. Sure, maybe they didn't get developed. You can point to that easily. Jimbo Fisher did not do a good job with the players that he brought in, and it has been reported before that he was really hunting for 5 stars in recruiting rankings and getting that national headline, and then not putting in the work. He put up his legs at his desk and said, I'm not going to do anything else. This is a Mike Elko team. They are going to be physical. They can win street fights. If they have a counterpunch and they can also be able to put up 40 points a game, this team is going to be a problem. For the Big Ten, there was a couple teams I wanted to contend for. I think these teams all could easily be the biggest surprises in the Big Ten. USC, I think, is being massively slept on. The fact that they were not in the top 25 for the preseason in the AP and coaches poll, I think is really bad. I think Nebraska could be a college football playoff sleeper. At plus 900 odds, I'm not giving advice to anybody to make any kind of decisions, but I think those are really good odds. I like Matt Rule. I like their quarterback. I like their OC, and I like the situation around them. But the one that I think is really getting slept on is Washington. Jedd Fisch, a head coach that was extremely enticing when he left Arizona. You remember the change of hands? He almost got left under the radar because, Kalen DeBoer was following Nick Saban's retirement. And then all of a sudden, Washington's left without a head coach. And they made a very good move getting Jedd Fisch from Arizona. And Arizona had a ton of NFL talent last year. A ton. The Noah Fafita, Tet McMillan, they had some corners that were really dynamic. There was real NFL talent, and they completely fell right on their face. And it makes you wonder, is Jedd Fisch really a ceiling and a floor riser as a head coach? Damon Williams, Jonah Coleman, that quarterback running back duo is extremely dynamic. I have questions about their physicality, and they do have some challenges in terms of the schedule. You would wish it would be a little bit easier, but at the end of the day, there's enough for me to like that we get to the end of the season. This was, I believe, a 6-win team last year. And they get to 8, maybe 9 wins. It would not shock me. It may shock the college football public, though. For the ACC, the biggest surpriser to me is going to be Duke. I like Darian Mensah. Do I think how they went about it was wild, kicking Malik Murphy to the side to bring in Darian Mensah for millions of dollars? Of course. But, with Manny Diaz, I know I'm going to get a very dynamic defense that is going to be aggressive. And Darian Mensah is a type of player that I think can carry an offense that they surprise some people. I think a lot of people are a little bit lower on, Manny Diaz as a head coach. Duke, I think, is a very interesting team that I would not want to face on a random Saturday night in November with my ACC title chances on the line. Now, they have some tough scheduling dynamics. I mean, going to Clemson in November is not a thing that you want to be in, but that could be a tough matchup for Clemson. Because a talent like Mensah, especially later into the year where he's going to be a lot more comfortable in this offense, because I think the supporting cast is easily the question that could make this prediction backfire. But people are high on Georgia Tech. People are high on Miami. There's people that are high on Virginia. If there was a team that I think we look back on and they add a couple wins to their record and we feel really good about where this program is at, especially how they pivoted losing Mike Elko, I really like Duke. And this one, if we want to talk about the Big 12 and surprises, nothing can surprise me about the Big 12. And that's not a cop-out answer, I promise you. The Big 12 can virtually do whatever it wants, and it wouldn't be a surprise. UCF could bring in all those transfers, have I'm blanking on the former Oklahoma USC defensive coordinator that was terrible, is now their defensive coordinator, and I'm kicking myself for forgetting. But it wouldn't shock me if UCF was all of a sudden good, because we saw what happened last year. The team that I think is going to surprise everyone in the Big 12, and I'm not talking Big 12 title game, I'm not talking like what Arizona State did. I'm not selling my Connor Wigman stock. I know what I saw. I know what my eyes saw in terms of film, and with a guy that I think was just really trying to make a poor situation work with Texas A&M. He goes to Houston. If you did not know, Houston has Connor Wigman, former 5-star quarterback. There's a lot of transfer outs for Houston. I think they are really trying to build this program from the ground up. But the thing that makes me believe, pardon me, is my screen frozen? One moment, everyone. I apologize, everyone. I realized I was frozen. I hope that wasn't for too long. I really do. Let me actually check, because that's going to be really frustrating if that's the case. I'll go back. Let me just go check real quick. Okay. Doesn't seem like it was that long. I apologize for that, everyone. Let me make sure. We'll talk about Houston here for a second. I think Houston is going to be the biggest surprise in the Big 12. Truthfully, nothing can surprise me about the Big 12 at the end of the day. But Houston with Connor Wigman is not going to be a Big 12 title contender. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is, do we go look back in January and we look back at what Houston has done with Willie Fritz? Let's not forget that he was a guy that a lot of people were high on, coming from Tulane, coming to Houston, and then you have all the problems of what happened last year. But they were also feisty towards the end of the season, something that a lot of people would just look at the record. They weren't paying attention to Houston. They weren't paying attention to Donovan Smith at quarterback. They saw all the transfers. They're just down in the dumps about this team. I'm not. I know Houston as a university is investing a ton into their athletic department. Obviously, the main focus is going to be their basketball program. But I know what I saw with Connor Wigman at Texas A&M. And I really do think it just was not a good mesh in terms of schematics with a guy like Colin Klein, who wants to move his quarterback downfield, use his legs. You saw the offense completely change with Marcel Reed in. I just don't think it was a match that Connor really wanted it to work, and it just didn't. And I think he looks the most healthy that he's ever been. And I think this is a guy that I was very high on coming out of high school. And I think that there's a lot to like, especially now he's going against Big 12 defenses. Speaking of Texas programs, like I said at the top of the hour, we have 5 college football programs to rank in Texas. We're going to go from 5 to 1. Here are the top 5 college football programs in the state of Texas. I'm sure people are going to be very calm about this one. My honorable mention is going to be Texas Tech. Now, pause. Red Raider fans, I know you're upset. You have the number 1 recruit in 2027. You have all the oil money in the world to be at the second spot on this list. Show me. You just got to show me. That's it. This is from the lens of a college football program for the next 5 years. I'm taking what you did for the previous 5. We're in the middle of the decade. What are you going to do for the next 5 years? And Texas Tech has invested a ton, but the on-field results do have to matter. And I think Texas Tech is incredibly interesting because they have another gear that most Big 12 teams don't have that in their arsenal, which is swinging a massive NIL hammer. But all of these teams either have another level of talent acquisition and have played at a high level and hit a different peak, or they've also just had more on-field success. Speaking of which, number 5, SMU. Welcome to the party, SMU. You are truly missed. I remember on my YouTube, I made a whole video talking about how the Pony Express is back. It is just better for college football seeing SMU back into contention. They made a college football playoff. They've been able to be pretty damn consistent in terms of recruiting, and they've made a very accelerated rise. They have quickly gotten to the Power 4, which I think was a great move for them, although it feels weird to have a Texas team in the Atlantic Coastal Conference. But I think 5 for SMU is completely fair, as they have at least made it to a college football playoff spot. If they can hit another year in terms of talent acquisition, I could see them higher. Baylor is an interesting case. You could argue SMU and Baylor. I would flip-flop between them because Baylor, I think, is a team that is coming back up. Dave Aranda is a coach that I like. They've made a Big 12 title game. There's a lot to like about Baylor in terms of moments. It's the consistency that worries me. At least for the past 5 years, I know that Baylor's been a part of a Power 4 program and that they've been able to obtain talent at that level. SMU, fresh, they're new. I just want to wait and see a little bit with SMU. Number 3, I have TCU. They've made a national championship, something that no one on this list has done. Mind you, they did it in the 14 playoff, which I would argue is almost more impressive. They beat Michigan. We don't have to talk about what happened against Georgia. TCU, that is carrying them very far. But as we drift further and further away from the 2022 season, they had to step back. Obviously, they lost all of that NFL talent. I was not expecting them to just immediately bounce back. They are dealing with the volatility of the transfer portal. But I truly do love what TCU could potentially be for this upcoming season and for the next couple of years. I think they have the head coach right. I like what they built. I think they have an identity now, and they're finally correcting the course and getting back into a rhythm, which I think is highly critical for them. People are going to more than likely be upset that Texas A&M is at number 2. I think Texas A&M is the second best team in the state of Texas for a couple of reasons. You could talk about TCU's national championship run. You could talk about SMU's playoff run. For me, Texas A&M acquires talent second to only Texas. Pretty simple. Texas Tech is quickly rising up those ranks, but Texas A&M and their talent acquisition, only Texas beats them. And as much as you want to make 8-4 jokes about Texas A&M, they are in the SEC, and they've also gotten very close to a college football playoff spot in 2020. I understand we're 5 years away, but like I said, 5-year sample size of what this program is. And in terms of a program, and based on what they have in terms of facilities, resources, everything within their arsenal, you can't look me in the eye and say, yeah, I'm taking TCU, Baylor, Texas Tech as a program in front of Texas A&M. Now, have they met the ceiling that they do have, which is a national title winning program? No, not even close. They have not met the expectation. But just because they have not met the expectation, does that change the game that we are playing, which is building a program, which Texas A&M has virtually everything available to them, including being in a Power 2 of the Big Ten and the SEC, which I think is highly critical, which leads me to the number 1 team in the state of Texas, Texas. Pretty simple. Their number 1 talent acquisition. They've had incredible success since joining the SEC. They made it to an SEC title game. They are by far the best team on paper going into next season and more than likely for the next 3 years. Steve Sarkisian is building a well-oiled machine. He's only waiting for a national title to confirm that this process worked and Texas is fully back. I think Texas is already back, but there's still some people that are wanting a national title in order for him to truly be back. They are the preseason number one team in the country, somehow being underdogs against Ohio State for the first time a preseason number one team has ever done that. I think it's definitive that Texas is easily the number one team in the state of Texas. So just to recap, this is the top 5 teams in the state of Texas. At number 5, I have SMU. At number 4, I have Baylor. At number 3, I have TCU. At number 2, I have Texas A&M. And at number 1 is the Texas Longhorns. Little up and down show. We had some technical malfunctions, but that will happen every once in a while. I'll just say this. Through the very early parts of this channel and this show, we've seen a ton of very quick support, something that I wasn't fully expecting. But the team here at Kretschmann Media has done such a fantastic job in equipping myself and everyone involved to put ourselves in the best position for success. And you guys have done your part in supporting in these early stages. Truly, I appreciate any like, comment, share that you guys ever put out, because this college football show means so much to me and I want it to build up to being something special. So with that in mind, thank you guys so much